Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to the World Over Live. We're delighted you decided to join us. This election season, there is rampant confusion about a whole host of issues, from the HHS mandate to abortion to same-sex marriage to the morality of budget cuts. Each party is arguing that the Catholic Church agrees with them. To cut through the clutter and talk about a well-formed conscience as Catholic voters go to the polls, Archbishop John Meyers of Newark will be here. He just wrote an important pastoral letter, which he'll share in a bit. This week marks a rather unsettling anniversary, 32 years of China's one-child policy. Here to discuss that dubious milestone and to share the findings of his new report on China is Stephen MOSHER, the president of the Population Research Institute. And finally, we lost one of the great American vocalists of the past 50 years earlier this week. Crooner Andy Williams passed away on Tuesday. We will pay tribute to him. His iconic voice will be sorely missed. I'll bring you an encore of my 2010 interview with Andy Williams. Remember, you can be part of the program. If you have a comment or a question, drop us an email at worldover@EWTN.com. Let's get started. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. Another suspected Boko Haram attack against Nigerian Christians. A woman and her baby were killed outside St. John's Catholic Church in the north-central city of Bauchi. A suicide car bomb was detonated at the entrance of the church compound during Mass on Sunday. 46 others were injured. 2 policemen who prevented the car from entering church grounds were also injured. Their actions likely saved dozens of lives. Meanwhile, a new Nigerian military crackdown on Boko Haram strongholds have resulted in the arrests of more than 150 people in recent weeks. Another 35 were reportedly killed in standoffs. In an interview with Reuters, President Goodluck Jonathan said his government's robust approach to neutralize Boko Haram is paying off. And a well-known Muslim television preacher in Egypt is facing 5 years in prison for tearing and burning pages of the Bible. Prosecutors this week charged the preacher with contempt of religion against Ahmed Mohammed Abdullah. He is seen here destroying the Bible during a protest in front of the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. The case against Abdullah is a rare example of Egypt's blasphemy laws used against someone who is allegedly insulting a religion other than Islam. Abdullah told the Associated Press he is not guilty because he targeted the book of a specific group of Christians who have offended Islam. Expounding further, he said, "I had always wished to go to court to explain to the world that there is no such thing as the Bible. Every church in the West has its own holy book." End quote. Abdullah's trial begins on September 30th. Back here in the United States, nearly a year after the Obama administration chose not to renew a multi-million-dollar grant to the U.S. Bishops' Conference to help human trafficking victims, President Obama on Tuesday praised Catholics for doing just that. In a speech to the Clinton Global Initiative meeting in New York, President Obama said he was honored to have the Catholic Church and other Christians, quote, answer the Bible's call to help trafficking victims. Republican Congressman James Lankford of Oklahoma denounced the presidential rhetoric in light of the grant removal, noting that the administration withdrew funding because the Catholic-run Victims Program would not encourage victims of abuse to seek an abortion or contraceptive drugs. And the Archbishop of Miami is encouraging Floridians to restore parental rights on the November ballot. In a column for the Tallahassee Democrat, Archbishop Thomas Wensky asked voters to support Amendment 6, a legislatively backed initiative that would require parental consent for a minor seeking an abortion. It would also restrict state funding for abortion. Archbishop Wensky said Florida law, which otherwise honors parental rights in medical decisions, should not exempt a full surgical procedure like an abortion, which can result in permanent health or psychological damage or even death, he said. Archbishop Wensky took issue with the dissent of some cultural Catholics on the issue. He reminded the faithful that no Catholic can assert that support for legalized abortion is coherent with church teachings. And parental rights have taken a hit in New York City as the nation's largest school district has launched an initiative offering the morning after pill to girls as young as 14. The New York City Department of Education will distribute the abortifacient drug Plan B at more than 50 of its high schools in an effort to reduce teen pregnancies. The New York Post first reported the program on Sunday. However, it has already been in effect for 4 years. Efforts to reduce teen pregnancy through the distribution of condoms and contraception seem to have failed miserably, as New York City schools have a pregnancy rate about twice the national average. Cardinal Archbishop of New York Timothy Dolan called the policy tragic and misguided. Cardinal Dolan says it usurps the parents' right and the responsibility to be the first and primary educators of their children. Staying in New York, an infamous piece of art, I use the term loosely, depicting a crucifix submerged in the jar of an artist's urine is back on display. We'll spare you the blasphemous name in the photograph. It was created by Andre Serrano. The Midtown Edward Tyler Nahum Gallery on Thursday opened a 25-year retrospective of Serrano's art. His body of work, which prolifically includes all sorts of bodily fluids, also includes a Madonna and child submerged in his urine. The crucifix depiction first drew nationwide attention in 1989 after Serrano received a federally funded $15,000 prize for the work from the National Endowment for the Humanities. The piece later sold at auction for more than $250,000. Rioting has not ensued outside the gallery, but the Catholic League is peacefully protesting the showing. And finally, there's offensive religious art, and then there's just bad religious art. Apparently, both are moneymakers. Last month, we reported that the Spanish town of Borja was trying to figure out what to do with a 19th century fresco of Christ that had been disfigured when an octogenarian attempted to restore it at a local church. If you don't remember, here is the before and after pic. This is Celia Jimenez's restoration project. For those of you listening on radio, the after looks like it was painted by a blindfolded kindergartner. After worldwide infamy and scorn, the fine people of Borja have figured out what to do. They've turned this disaster into a tourist attraction. The crowds wanting to see the restoration are so large, the foundation that owns the church is charging admission, €1 per visitor. Meanwhile, internet entrepreneurs have moved quickly to cash in on the phenomenon. The image can now be seen on T-shirts, cell phone covers, coffee mugs, wine labels, etc. Mrs. Jimenez is now getting in for her piece of the action. Lawyers representing Jimenez are seeking copyright protection for the disfigured masterwork. Is the lesson here to go out and deface a classic so you can later claim copyright to it? Let's hope not. When we return, Archbishop John Meyers joins us to talk about a well-formed Catholic conscience this election season and tell us why he's written a pastoral letter on the true nature of marriage. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. Religious liberty is a major concern for Catholics this election season. My next guest has written a pastoral letter in his archdiocese about an institution that he feels is under attack, and he believes it could further restrict the religious liberties of Catholics and Catholic institutions. The letter is entitled, When Two Become One, a pastoral teaching on the definition, purpose, and sanctity of marriage. Joining us via satellite is Archbishop of Newark, New Jersey, John Meyers. Your Excellency, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you again, Raymond.
Now, in the pastoral letter, you define the nature and purpose of marriage, and you also suggest that this could in some way, if this redefinition was allowed to go forward, that it could restrict religious liberty. It could somehow present a grave threat to religious freedom. How so?
Well, first of all, the definition of marriage is that it is a union of one man and one woman in a body union which involves love and commitment and openness to children. To redefine marriage is a serious problem, especially if the state is trying to impose a definition on other people that is contrary to their conscience. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if the state were to insist that all the schools teach about marriage in a certain way, that, and in fact that they would equate one same-sex marriage with any other marriage, and in fact that would be wrong, especially for parents whose conscience leads them and to believe otherwise. They entrust their children to the schools, and if the schools are teaching in a way contrary to their own belief, that is a violation of the rights of parents. Mm-hmm. So I believe that the attempt to redefine marriage is a very serious problem for the society.
Mm-hmm. And you think this could also affect Catholic institutions, similar to what we've seen in adoption services in places like Boston and Chicago, even D.C.?
And even Peoria, Illinois. Ah. In fact, it is affecting what the church is able to do. And in some countries like Canada, if one preaches from faith, the proper understanding of marriage, it can be labeled a hate crime and be subject to civil prosecution.
Mm-hmm. Archbishop, why write this pastoral letter now?
This flows out of a rather long concern, which I have shared with many observant people, that the family and marriage, our society, are under threat. They are disintegrating. The notion of a permanent commitment between man and woman, which is forever, which is giving the gift of self and receiving the gift of other, and is it open to children, both to have children and to rear them properly. Mm-hmm. And anything which undermines that adds to the instability in our society itself. Mm-hmm.
Archbishop Meyers, supporters of same-sex marriage, indeed many Catholics, say, look, these people, these same-sex couples, they love each other, and you're telling them who they can and can't love. Who is the church to do that, they say?
Well, first of all, we're not telling them who they can and cannot love. The church itself loves everyone, regardless of their sexual inclination. Mm-hmm. But in fact, to try to label a relationship they might enter into which involves illicit sexual relations is simply contrary to the Word of God and to natural law we believe.
Mm-hmm. I want to get into the pastoral in a moment, but let's step back. Both parties, both Republicans and Democrats, are claiming the church and the bishops support their positions on a variety of issues, from the morality of budget cuts to abortion. The political parties have selectively suggested that the church stands with them. Now, you say in your letter it's important for people to follow their consciences. Consciences that are formed. Explain that and what is required.
Well, conscience is something which one does not form according to one's feelings or current understandings or intuitions or preferences. It is rather bringing one's mind and heart in concert with the will of God and the plan of God for creation. So it is not something subjectivist. It's not something that can vary from person to person. the truth is the truth, and conscience is involved in the search for God's truth and the desire to live according to that truth.
Archbishop Meyers, what are the non-negotiables that people should keep in mind in the view of the church? What are the non-negotiables as people step into that voting booth this November?
Well, it's very clear that the right to life is one of them. I think the call to chastity of all persons, but also our duty to love and respect the dignity and rights of every person. What we do not believe is the right of a person is to try to redefine marriage, which is a God-given gift to the human family. And so we think that those who would attempt to move in this direction are in fact contributing to the breakup of families and to the instability of marriage and family in our society.
Now, in the pastoral letter, you define what the church has taught throughout time and that this institution predates the church. Yet some would say, look, in a same-sex marriage, you have a stable, committed couple here, and if that works in the heterosexual realm, why shouldn't it work in the homosexual realm? And isn't that good for society to have stable, committed relationships? You would say what?
I would say, first of all, that to use the term marriage about it is a misnomer, is a mistake from the beginning. Now, certainly, people can have friendships, but friendships which lead to unchaste actions, which is sexual activity among those who are not married, is a serious wrong. And so it's misleading to pretend that we can redefine marriage and set limits in this way.
There are those who say that if you base marriage on procreation, and your pastoral letter mentions that this is, you know, a procreative love and two in one flesh, that if you base it on procreation, heterosexuals who can't have children violate that idea. So what's wrong with a homosexual couple coming together in unity without producing children?
Well, first of all, it's not true that heterosexual couples who are unable to have children, not because of a choice which they make, but because of perhaps they're infertile, perhaps they're old and beyond the childbearing age, but they enter into a committed, loving relationship, and of themselves they would be open to children. Now, by the very nature of homosexual activity, they cannot be open to children because obviously it takes a man and a woman for that kind of relationship and that kind of married activity.
Your Excellency, we've heard from some, even within the church, who have ministries to the gay community out in the West where there are ballot initiatives on this topic. And they've suggested that equality and justice requires recognizing these same-sex unions. You would say what to that argument?
I would say that philosophers from the Greek period all the way through to our founding fathers, to Martin Luther King Jr., to all kinds of thinkers and people of faith and who are philosophers, would understand that one must, and any law to be valid must be in conformity with God's plan for the world.
Archbishop, some have suggested in reading your pastoral, you've been very clear that you are not intending to support one party or the other. You're simply stating what the church teaches. There was a poll done in a Newark paper, 66% suggest, or they believe, that you are supporting one party, Governor Romney in this case. 33% say no, you're not supporting a candidate. What would you say about that poll?
I would say that I'm trying to teach from basic principles. I am not entering into a national race or state races for different representatives. The pastoral was conceived long before these candidates or parties had taken this positions of this kind, and that is not why it is written. I do not pretend to be able to enter the booth and push a button for someone or to tell someone how to vote.
I want to step back for a moment and look at some of the polling we're seeing in the Catholic community. Pew just did a poll on September 16th. And
yes, I know that.
Overall, Catholics are supporting the president 54%. They're supporting Governor Romney 39%. Among church-going Catholics, Romney gets 51% of the vote, Obama 42%. There's a 15-point spread over all Catholics in the president's favor. Among church-going Catholics, there's a 9-point advantage for Governor Romney. Why do you think it is so close, given the religious liberty battle that seems to continue on, the abortion debate, the same-sex marriage debate, all of this swirling around this campaign season? Why do you think Catholics are still so divided?
Well, I don't know all of the reasons, but I suspect it's because of the nature of the media, which promotes a rather liberal, secularist viewpoint, and Catholics are influenced by the media also. And so it's important for the teachers in the church, primarily the bishops, but also priests and others who represent the church, to speak the truth clearly and ever more clearly, and not to hesitate.
And do you think that message is getting out? Do you think that sort of moral clarity has been issued this election season?
Well, certainly I think it has in my pastoral, and I think we will continue to do that. And some people try to say the church is not concerned about the poor, but I don't know of any organization which has cared for the poor more than we have, except perhaps governments. And in fact, we teach very clearly from the beginning and consistently that we must be concerned for the poor. So when we talk about joblessness, the difficulty in obtaining proper housing or medical care or whatever it is, we need to be concerned about those things too. And I know that our voters must think that through, and they make their final decision. What I'm trying to do is to emphasize the great significance of the issue of marriage and the stability of marriage and the importance of commitment to family life.
And this would outweigh then those prudential judgments, if you will, on the budget and niggling over where this fund goes or that fund goes. You believe that these issues, and the church teaches these issues, are primordial, that they overwhelm the others?
I think that what we've been talking about is more substantial, but certainly other issues are important. But you can be concerned about those issues and have a variety of opinions about them. And the church does not pretend to have all the answers on that.
Very good. We will leave it there. Archbishop John Meyers, thank you so much for being with us. For more on the Archdiocese of Newark and to read Archbishop Meyers' pastoral letter, you can visit rcan.org. Click on the link in the middle of the page under Latest News. Thank you again, Archbishop. When we return, what have been the effects of China's one-child policy after 32 years in existence? Population Research Institute President Stephen MOSHER will tell us when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. This week marks the 32nd year anniversary of China's one-child policy. to unpack the impact this has had on Chinese society and to share his newly released report on China, Growing Chinese Power, to what end, is the president of the Population Research Institute, Steve MOSHER. Steve, welcome to the program. Incidentally,
thanks,
Steve was one of the first, or the first, social scientists to visit mainland China and has spent his life exposing the country's human rights record and population control programs. Steve, let's start with this dark anniversary, the one-child policy in China. What impact has it had on the society and the population that remains in China?
Well, the one-child policy has been in place now for 32 years. I was the first Western eyewitness to the one-child policy when it began back in 1980. I saw women arrested for the crime of being pregnant. I saw them dragged off to abortion clinics. I saw them forcibly aborted, given lethal injections into the womb to kill their unborn children, forcibly sterilized afterwards just so they wouldn't be back in a year or two to with another illegal pregnancy, as it's called. I had no idea 32 years ago the Chinese government would continue the policy for this long. I mean, the death toll is 400 million now and climbing. Mm-hmm. They have eliminated 400 million people from their population, and yet they continue.
Now, the population control advocates will say, look, this population is unsustainable all around the world, and even the United States now fully funds abortions abroad. So what's the problem here? Why doesn't that limit America's ability to object to this one-child policy? And isn't it really now regarded as a model around the world?
Well, it certainly has been regarded by the UN Population Fund as a model for other countries, and they've attempted to export China's one-child policy to other places like North Korea and Vietnam and Peru and other countries. It shouldn't be a model. It's a model for barbarism. It's a model for violation of human rights. But it's something that we have been funding for the last 4 years of the Obama administration. Our money, our tax dollars, has been going to the UN Population Fund, and from there has been sent into China to support the one-child policy. I think if you ask ordinary Americans on the street, 90% of them would say they wanted nothing to do with a policy that forces women who are sometimes 8 and 9 months pregnant to have abortions and actually commits cases of infanticide, killing babies at birth.
Now, we have read reports, All Girls Aloud and some other places have posted stories that the Chinese government is banning the one-child policy. Is that true?
No, unfortunately, this is the latest in a whole series of efforts to create favorable propaganda about the Chinese state, the Chinese government.
On whose behalf?
Beijing periodically announces that it's going to end abuses in the one-child policy, and then we send investigators in and we find out that the same things are happening. The arrest of pregnant women, their forced abortion, their forced sterilization, and so forth. This is just the latest in a propaganda effort to try to gloss over these abuses. Even as we sit here and talk, Raymond, there are women being arrested for the crime of being illegally pregnant. There are women being forcibly aborted in China. I know there are still women fleeing forced abortion that we're trying to help in various ways.
Let's talk for a moment about the military buildup in China. They are adopting a very bold stance, growing their military, building armaments. They're even contracting with some American corporations to do so. You, in your report, you say they've adopted a revenge-based military policy. What does that mean?
Well, China has always been, in its view, the center of the world. That's what the name China means. Zhongguo, the middle kingdom, the kingdom at the center of the earth. For thousands of years, they were the dominant country in Asia, surrounded by smaller tributary states. That's where they want to be again. That's why they're building up their military. And you know, the larger and more advanced their military grows, the more aggressive they become. You know, 30 years ago, they would not have claimed the entire South China Sea, which is claimed also by Indonesia, Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines. 40 years ago, they wouldn't have attacked the Vietnamese Navy. They wouldn't have attacked the Philippine Navy. They're doing that now. 30 years ago, their maps did not show the Senkaku Islands, the site of the recent standoff between Japan and China, as part of China. Now they're claiming them. So the stronger they get, the more their territorial claims grow, and that's very worrisome.
Yeah, the conflicts with Korea, the conflicts with Japan, what are their goals in Asia? Are they to be the hegemon, as one of your books suggested,
well,
the center of all of this, the kingdom reigning over all?
They would certainly like to be the dominant power in Asia, and of course they're now casting their ambitions over the wider world. That's why we will have, for example, we began 10 years ago to pivot towards Asia, in part at the request of countries like Vietnam, city-states like Singapore, and the Philippines. They want a larger U.S. presence in the region because they know that we are a distant power with no territorial ambitions. We want stability, we want free trade, and they want to use us. They want us to help them as a counterweight to China's growing military might. Otherwise, they'll be absorbed into the greater China co-prosperity sphere.
What about Taiwan? I mean, is Taiwan about to just be taken over, or is it being repopulated?
Taiwan is a democracy. It's had free elections now for 20 years. They have had a successful transfer of power from one political party, the Nationalists, to the Minjindang, the Democratic Progressive Party. And that's the ultimate test of a democracy, when you can peacefully hand over power from one group to another. So they are a full-fledged democracy. They're a model for the rest of China. And we hope that Taiwan survives so that China one day, the Chinese people, can rise up and emulate the democracy they see there.
Let's talk about the church in China. Long regarded as a bastion not only of freedom, but it holds the seeds of liberty that I think are so suppressed there. The underground church has been loyal all these years. What is the state now of the underground church? We keep hearing reports that the underground church is a fabrication because the people in the Patriotic Association, the communist-approved church, are really loyal to Rome as well, and there's no reason to get upset about this. Your thoughts?
Cardinal Zen told me several years ago that there was no way for the true church, the loyal church, the Orthodox church in China to work with the Patriotic Association because they were so compromised by the government. I still believe that to be the case. And you know that the Chinese Communist Party has taken for several years a very hard line with regard to the Catholic Church in China. The persecution is intensifying. Bishops are being forced to participate in illegitimate, illicit ordinations of other so-called bishops. The Vatican, the Holy Father, has bent over backwards to try and accept bishops nominated by the Patriotic Association as licit bishops, but he's now had to draw a line in the sand and say no more. The compromise has all been on the part of the Catholic Church. The government is not willing to compromise at all. What's
the end goal here? I mean, this kind of intimidation, it can't go on forever. I mean, rounding up priests and bishops and people going to Mass on Sunday. How does this end, do you think?
Well, I think what has happened in China, in broad strokes, is China has become economically freer. There is now the possibility of starting your own business in China. Farmers now farm land that's leased to them by the government for 70 years. At the same time, because it loosened those economic controls, I think the Chinese party state, in order to stay in control, has tightened controls on things like having children. Yeah. Limiting everyone to one child, tightening controls on Tibet, tightening controls on the other minorities, tightening controls on the church to maintain the muscular tone of the system, Raymond, so the people will not rise up.
What do you say to those? And I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs and investors, and they say, look, this is what the West once was here in America. This is a land of plenty. The market's thriving. There's excitement. There's an entrepreneurial spirit. And you know what? If you keep trading there and we keep investing there, inevitably our values, our democratic values, will convey to the Chinese. You would say what?
I would say 30 years ago, I believed this fairy tale. I no longer do. Economic freedom is a result of political freedom, but economic freedom does not necessarily lead to political freedom. The Chinese party state is determined to stay in control, and I think has the wherewithal to stay in tight Leninist control of Chinese society for years, if not decades to come.
In your report, you point out that this is increasingly a male society because the females have been killed due to the one-child policy. The extermination of females there is horrendous. What impact does that have on the Chinese society, the Chinese spirit, if you will, and what does it tell us about the future of that country?
That's a very, very interesting question. We have now tens of millions of missing baby girls in China who've been killed by sex-selective abortion, killed by female infanticide, killed from simple neglect. We have tens of millions of young men who are growing up without the ability to find a bride. They will not be able to marry and have children. They will seek alternative families. They will join the military in large numbers, I predict. The military is a kind of alternative family. They will join gangs. Criminal activity is on the rise in China. And they will immigrate to other countries where there are women. Countries like in Southeast Asia, like Burma and Vietnam and so forth, where there are large and growing Chinese communities. It's, you know, I was a young man once. And it's the stabilizing influence of a woman and the responsibility of taking care of children and a family that turns us all from boys to men. There are 50 million young men in China who are not going to have that experience, and I think they're going to be a very destabilizing element.
Nonetheless, their economy is steaming ahead. 7% growth. We're at just 1%. By 2016, it's expected their economy will surpass the United States economy. What will that do to the balance of America's influence in that region and China's influence over the world?
Well, obviously, the more powerful China becomes, unfortunately, the more aggressive it becomes. We need to get our economy going again. There's no reason why, if we have the right economic policies, that we can't achieve growth rates of 3% and 4% and 5% a year. That's where we should be now. We shouldn't be down at 1%. China, on the other hand, is profiting from manipulating its currency. We have failed to address that. We need to identify China as a currency manipulator and then go on to impose tariffs on Chinese goods coming into this country. As soon as we did that, we would see American industry resurrected. We would see factories opening up in the United States. We would create hundreds of thousands of jobs, and we would force China, by doing that, to abide by the same rules that we abide by. We would establish a level playing field. They would have to appreciate their currency, and we would have fair trade again, which we do not have now.
Tell me about the Confucius Institutes. Now, these are all over the world, but they're in the United States. Tell us about them. These seem to be little houses of cultural immersion. What's wrong with that, Steve Mosher?
Well, we really shouldn't call them Confucius Institutes. We should call them Mao Zedong Institutes or Chairman Mao Institutes, because what they are is not simple institutes set up for the purpose of teaching the Chinese language or promoting cultural exchange, which would be innocent and acceptable. They are set up in order to promote China's attempt to achieve an increase in soft power around the world, to refurbish China's image, to increase its ability to watch over Chinese students at American universities. There are now over 100 Confucian Institutes at American universities. They are funded by the Chinese government. They are run by the United Front Department of the Chinese Communist Party. What does the United Front Department do? It's an organization that's set up to co-opt and take over other organizations and control them for the purposes of the Chinese Party state. So this is run by, this is not the Goethe Institute. You know, these are not innocent cultural exchange organizations. These are organizations that are part of China's effort to project soft power around the world. And
is there no concern at the State Department about this?
Well, I think there is, and there are universities like the University of Chicago that have rejected the idea of a Confucian Institute. They've turned down the millions of dollars they were offered by the Chinese government in order to set up this institute. And more power to them, because once you let this Trojan horse onto your campus, you suddenly find out that you can't talk openly about independence for Tibet. You can't talk openly about the one-child policy and forced abortions. You can't talk about Taiwan as an independent country. You have to abide by hew to the Chinese party line. That's why they set them up.
Interesting, interesting. And talk for a moment about the piracy, intellectual piracy that is going on even now, and why there seems to be no sense of outrage in this building behind us at the Capitol or anywhere else here in D.C.
Well, there should be. I mean, billions of dollars have been stolen, of intellectual property have been stolen from the United States. Every Fortune 500 company has had hackers based probably in China, working through servers in Vietnam and North Korea, for plausible deniability, have had their computer systems hacked, and huge tranches of data have been stolen overnight and transferred into China. Things like, how to manufacture polymers, how to make different kinds of paints. I mean, all sorts of technical expertise that have been developed by research in American factories over the last decades have gone in the last few years to China.
To say nothing of the armaments being ordered.
The
and the
armaments,
defense,
the Pentagon computers have been hacked. Our plans for reinforcing our forces in Asia in the event of Chinese aggression have been stolen. There is nothing that hasn't been at least attempted to be hacked.
Tell us about China's influence in the Middle East. David Cameron in Britain recently charged that China and Russia are to blame for much of the Assad regime's aggression, particularly the way they've assaulted and destroyed children and families there.
Well, if you supply weapons to a brutal dictator who doesn't flinch at killing innocent bystanders, then you're partially responsible, I think, for the carnage that happens. In Iran, of course, working directly and sometimes indirectly through North Korea, they have helped the Iranian nuclear program, which, as we know, is threatening to cause a catastrophe in the Middle East in the months to come.
Right. Well, once again, we heard it this week, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad saying Israel's going to be wiped off the face of the map, and this is clearly our intention. When you have another well-funded regime pouring money into that country, it's frightening.
Providing centrifuges, providing underground communications networks that will enable Iran, of course, to more effectively fend off an Israeli defensive attack. So China has been backing Iran to the hilt.
You have in the past said that it was global domination, to be the hegemon. That was China's intention. Do you still stand by that goal? You think that is their ultimate aim?
Absolutely. I think China sees itself in a long twilight struggle with the United States in particular and with the Western world in general, because they think at the end of the day one of two systems is going to come to dominate. Either the Chinese party state, which centralizes all economic and political power in the hands of a single 70 million strong Chinese Communist Party, will come to dominate, or you will find freedom and democracy flourishing everywhere, including in China. So I think this is, those of us who thought that with the collapse of the Soviet Union, we would never again face a threat to our very existence, to our very way of life, had better rethink that, because we now do.
So what's the answer? What should policymakers be doing vis-a-vis trade, military engagement, as well as cultural exchange?
Well, I think first of all we should make it very clear to China that they are manipulating their currency, and what we have with them is not fair trade, is not free trade, but a trade that is weighted in their favor. Given
the fact that we are such a huge market for China, and the United States is, shouldn't that be tied to the human rights record, to the military aggression in the region?
Well, I think so. We gave up our ability to do that in part back in the early 90s when we gave China permanent most favored nations trading status. Before then, we had an annual review. Every May 1st, the president would have to declare if China was abiding by the terms of our agreements, and dissidents would be released and the political repression would relax for a while. We've lost that now, but we still have the ability, as China's largest market, to rein in the excesses of this regime. And the sooner we act, the better.
Very good. Stephen Mosher, thank you. Always informative. For more on Stephen Mosher's Population Research Institute and to read PRI's special report on growing Chinese power, visit their website, pop.org. When we return, we'll remember the life and music of singing legend Andy Williams. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. As I mentioned earlier, this week saw the passing of a legend. Singer and television star Andy Williams died on Tuesday in his Branson, Missouri home following a year-long battle with bladder cancer. He was 84. Perhaps best known for his classic vocal on Moon River, Williams' career spanned decades, scoring top hits in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He hosted The Andy Williams Show from 1962 to 1971, as well as numerous television specials. For many families, Williams and his music were synonymous with Christmas, and his annual Christmas specials continued long after his show had ended. A few years ago, Andy joined us on the world over to perform a Christmas favorite, The Most Wonderful Time of the Year, and at that time, we spent a few minutes talking to him about his life and his career. Here's some of that interview. I want to start with Christmas. Why do you think you're so identified with Christmas? What is it about your voice, your persona? I mean, I can think of only one other artist, Nat King Cole, that I think of as being so identified with Christmas.
Well, I guess it would have to be because I've done so much television, you know, over the years. I had my own show for nearly 10 years, and so there's a Christmas show involved there every year. And then I've stayed on after the series went off the air. I still did, I think, 3 years of Christmas shows after that. So I have 6 Christmas albums out, so I guess I better be known for Christmas.
Well, let me tell you.
I've wasted a lot of time.
No. You're a staple at our house, and a little bit later you'll be singing for us, and I thank you for agreeing to do that. You were born in Wall Lake, Iowa, and you started singing with your brothers, but this wasn't this was a pretty difficult moment in your life. I mean, it was real poverty and rough.
Well, we were poor, but my father was working anyway. He was a railway mail clerk, a guy that sorts mail on a train as it's moving, you know, between small towns. And so we weren't destitute, but we were quite poor. But none of the kids knew it. You know, everybody could eat.
Yeah.
Everybody wore hand-me-downs, you know, from somebody else.
He'd even barter for your shoes and food on occasion.
Well, he did. He was great at that. He would take us into, when we moved to Des Moines, we needed shoes. So he took us into a Florsheim shoe shop, and he got us all fitted for shoes. Now he said, now let's talk about how we're going to pay for it.
Now, there was another phrase that he repeated to you that lingered long in your memory when he said, you have to practice harder because you're not as good as others out there. He told you and your brothers that.
Yeah, he said, you're not as good as the others, so you have to work harder. And that's a terrible thing to say to a little kid. I was 7 years old when he got us all together and put our hands together and said, one for all and all for one, and you've got to work harder because you're not as good as the others. So I took that to heart. You know, I don't know whether my brothers did that much, but I did. And so all my life, I never thought I was as good as the others. Wow. So I had to work harder. And in the long run, I guess it was good because I did work harder. And I didn't give up what you know, ordinarily people would give up if they had as much problem getting going as I did. When I was singing alone, I'm talking about now.
What was Christmas like during those years of struggle?
Well, it was great. In Wall Lake, Iowa, it was so small that everybody's door was open, and they would even string lights from one house to another. You know, it was just a big communal Christmas.
You sort of see that in the Christmas specials throughout the years that you had. It was the community was always coming together at Andy's little cottage or house or wherever you were.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun doing those shows. It really was, because I had my brothers. I hadn't sung with them in a long time. So every Christmas we'd sing. My wife and children were growing up during that time.
Right.
So people, I think, like to watch the show year after year to see the children grow. Yep. You know, well, what do they look like now?
Yeah. Now, tell me, how do you warm up? How do you take care of this voice?
I don't do anything. I don't warm up.
At all?
No.
Oh, my God.
Before I go on, I do some moos. Moo.
To get the sound up into the mask.
To get this moving a little bit, the larynx and the vocal cords.
And that's it? That's the warm-up?
Moo.
Oh, that's depressing.
Moon River. Moo.
I can moo all day, and I won't be able to sing that.
Well, it'll get everything loosened up.
Tell me about your Christmas wish this year. What is your Christmas wish for your fans, for those watching us tonight?
Well, I just wish everybody have a happy, Merry Christmas, you know, and don't think the world is coming to an end.
There's still hope.
There's still hope. That's what we want to get across.
Could you, before I let you go, can you fulfill a huge Christmas wish of mine?
Now, what would that be?
Could we sing I Wish You a Merry Christmas?
You want to sing I Wish You a Merry Christmas?
You and me,
All
together.
Right.
We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Harmony with the great man himself. Thank you. Andy,
thank you.
You've made a little early Christmas cheer. He was a great sport and a wonderful singer. May Andy Williams rest in peace. That's all the time we have. The show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. The Twitter and Facebook pages are linked on the left-hand side of the site. Like me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo. Now, a programming note. Beginning September 29th through October 7th, EWTN will bring you a special novena to the Mother of God for the nation. Join us each day at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Bishops from across the country will lead each of the 9 days of prayer for the protection of religious liberty. Details can be found by visiting EWTN's website. And be sure to join us next week. Newt and Callista Gingrich will be here. Newt will give us his take on the first presidential debate in the U.S. It's going to be a big night. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching. Bye now.